All right. Just click off that. Right here.
I didn't want to move. I knew what you're doing.
All right. Done there. Got it. Admit all. All right. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It is good to have you all back. Happy New Year. Dad, I was saying you're fixing to start seminary and then they postpone classes for another week. That's not even cool.
The power's out there, and I thought, oh,
The power's out there too?
yeah, we're fixing some transformer, or Quentin hadn't had Wi-Fi for the break or something he was saying, and then it all got postponed because of the storm. So it just,
I think Hickory postponed it because they're requiring all of their students be boosted.
oh, that too, but I mean, all this with the power was like an additional thing.
Yeah, and it snowed in Hickory, but I don't think it stayed. So anyway, we are back at in Proverbs. We are with Proverbs 11. So let us begin with prayer. We thank you, God, for this day, for this chance to get back together to dig into your word. We ask that you would bless this time and bless us. May we learn from your word in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you who missed last time, I was about to say last week, but last time, we moved into Proverbs 10. And in Proverbs 10, there's a shift in the way Proverbs was. Beginning with Proverbs 10, we get the short, pithy, traditional Proverbs, like the one verse Proverbs, which means it's a little more challenging to teach because they're loosely grouped together, I'm learning, but not completely grouped together. And so a lot of it is we're going to look at these and it's, what do you hear in it? What do you learn from this? Because, in studying the text and the commentaries, it's a lot of, well, this is what it said in the Hebrew, and it's not adding a ton of insight. I'm still reading it because every once in a while there'll be some insight there, but there's not a ton. It's kind of like, well, what it says is what it means. And so take this. So that being said, let's get into it. First of all right, share screen. Right. Here we go. We're going to start with the first two verses, 11, 1 and 2. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but an accurate weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but wisdom is with the humble. Okay, read through those again, and then we will chat about them. Okay, what are you hearing in what wisdom are you gleaning from this?
Be honest in your dealings.
Yes. Apparently, now this is one thing that I did learn. When people would come to market, they would carry their own weights. And so you would have one set of weight, and the dishonest people would have one set of weights for when they were buying and one set of weights for when they were selling, and the weights weren't the same. So, if they're buying, the weights are lighter, and if they're selling, the weights are heavier. Which it's interesting that the word used here is abomination. It's also that is the word used in Leviticus when it says, when a man lies with a man, it is an abomination before God. And yet we will drill and dance all day long about homosexuality because it says it's an abomination, but cheating other people, well, that's more of a white sin. That's a white lie. You don't hear people being kicked out of the church for being a little dishonest, for making a little profit on the side. But that's the same word is used. Basically, it's abhorrent before God. And the only example I have, did any of you ever see Karate Kid 2? In Karate Kid 2, that there's actually a scene where Daniel LaRusso catches a guy cheating in the weighing. And that's the only time I've ever seen, witnessed anything like that in kind of a movie. But apparently it was common enough that that's how that it made it in Proverbs. And this is not the only time we've seen it in Proverbs, is it? We've seen it other times as well. And then what about verse 2?
Be humble and not proud.
Yeah. Well, what happens to the proud?
They're disgraced.
Well, yeah. But what do you think that means?
They think more highly of themselves than they do of others. So they don't think it's wrong to cheat them or to put them down.
Yeah. Well, but the proud have a lot farther to fall. When you're on a pedestal, hurts a lot worse when you fall off. Whether you put yourself there or whether others put you there. And so the proud would put themselves up on a pedestal, and then it, like I said, when things come crumbling down, when they're proven wrong, when they make a mistake, think about it. If somebody who's humble makes a mistake, nobody blinks. But if somebody who's arrogant makes a mistake, everybody notices. That's just the way it is. Those mistakes tend to stand out a lot more because, those people think they're never wrong. And so when they are wrong, everybody's sort of like, see, you're wrong. All right, let's move on.
Happens to everybody.
It does happen to everybody. Because everybody's wrong. However, when you're arrogant, it hurts a lot worse.
Further to fall.
Yes, exactly. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless keeps their way straight, but the wicked fall by their own wickedness. The righteous of the upright saves them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their schemes. When the wicked die, their hope perishes, and the expectation of the godless comes to nothing. The righteous are delivered from trouble, and the wicked get into it instead. So let's read through that again. Oops, wrong one. Okay. So what did you learn from those parables?
I think I want to be in that righteous group.
Yeah.
Well, it is that you reap the rewards or the consequences as a result of how you behave and how you treat others.
Yeah. Yes. But now it is interesting because we talked about a lot about the prosperity gospel and how it can be found in Proverbs. However, in verse 4, it says something quite different, right?
Mhm.
Riches do not profit in the day of wrath. In other words, the wise don't put their hope in riches. They don't put their faith in riches. And so the righteousness delivers from death. And also, you can't buy your way out of this. When God comes along, you can't pay God off. So what else?
I love verse 8. The righteous are delivered from trouble, and the wicked get into it instead.
Oops. Yeah, that one kind of points his finger at me a little bit. Just saying. I mean, you've been there. But that's exactly right. I mean, and it's also interesting that the kids that are always good, when they do something wrong, they get out of it. You ever notice that? Like in schools and stuff, those kids get out of it a lot easier than the ones of us who got into a little more trouble. You know, the consequences aren't quite as severe, probably because, you know, you haven't done it this many times. I'm curious, for those of you who with a different version of the Bible, what does your verse 7 say?
When a wicked man dies, his hope perishes. All he expected from his power comes to nothing.
Interestingly enough, the original Hebrew does not have the word wicked. It's basically when a man dies, their hope perishes, and the expectation of the godless comes to nothing. And that also rings true. The example that they gave in the commentary was everybody that had their hope in JFK, it was dashed when he was killed. And honestly, the hope that you have in this world it comes to an end when we die. That hope becomes a reality, quite honestly. But you know, I think in keeping with what was said, I think the general thought was that a word was left out, and so it was put in. But it still has meaning even without the word there. But it doesn't quite go as well, because it, you know, in this you've got the but it's positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Now, one of the things that I learned is a lot of times the sage is what it's called. The writer is called, or we'll just call him Solomon. Whenever a theme changes, it'll go negative, negative, or it'll go from positive, negative to negative, positive, or negative, negative, or positive, positive. That's one of the, that's sort of one of the, I guess, the ways of transition, that it just sort of, that it does that. So anything else in those? If not, we shall move on. And this is just verse 9. With their mouths, the godless would destroy their neighbors. I don't know how that happened. With their mouths, the godless would destroy their neighbors, but by knowledge, the righteous are delivered. Let's look at that. What do you think that means?
It says to me that how lies and dishonest information can hurt people. But if you've got, if you're accused of a crime, for instance, and if you've got a good alibi, i.e. the righteous, then you get out of it. But you've got a lot of bad things going on because of the lie that was told about you.
Well, and yeah, because the wicked destroy their neighbors by spreading lies and stuff, but knowledge delivers people from that. Being wise will deliver you from that. So that's a good thing. But now, did you notice though, again, in that it was a transition. It was a gateway. It goes negative, positive. And so that's just sort of a, hey, the theme's about to change. But yeah, and a lot of what we're talking about with is now being righteous in public. And, you know, before it really talked about, you know, just doing what's right and what's wrong, more individual. Now we talk a lot more about the impact that it has on the community as we move forward into the next section. All right. So we're going to go to 10 to 15. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. By the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. Whoever belittles another lacks sense, but an intelligent person remains silent. A gossip goes about telling secrets, but one who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a confidence. Where there is no guidance, a nation falls. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. To guarantee loans for a stranger brings trouble, but there is safety in refusing to do so. Okay, let's read back through those.
Yes.
I'll just let y'all read through it. Okay, what do you hear there? I'll start with the first one. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. Both end with a party. I think Tony, our organist, well, who am I talking to? I think Tony said the other day he saw a meme about Betty White, or somebody did, that said, I mean, there's been tons of them, but it said, wouldn't it be great that when you die, people think you died, you're 99 years old and people wish you lived longer, or something to that effect. You know, that it says a lot about who she was. Not many people could say anything negative about Betty White when she died, and we were all sad that she didn't live longer, you know, because we kind of thought she would never die, quite honestly. And you know, I think that sort of goes along here. But when the wicked die, yay, we don't have to worry about him anymore. You know, when Charles Manson died in prison, was anybody heartbroken about that? You know, well, I'm sure there were some crazy people that were, but for the most part, nobody was really broken up about it. Because, hey, we don't have to worry about him anymore. By the blessing of the upright, a city's exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. You know, that's kind of interesting when you think of politics today. How much do our leaders get in trouble with by running their mouths? You know, and then whoever belittles another lacks sense, but an intelligent person remains silent. I like that. That one should be basically, that should be one of the most famous proverbs out there. The person who belittles another lacks sense. So when you put somebody down, it makes you look stupid. The intelligent just keep quiet.
And you know, it's in schools, we try to tell the kids who are being bullied that the bullies lack sense, basically, and that don't pay attention to them. It doesn't work, but we still say that.
Yeah. I mean, of course, nowadays, anything that anybody does that's negative, it's considered bullying, I guess. I mean, it was a lot more obvious when I was a kid. If you were being bullied, it's because somebody pushed you into a locker or shoved you in it or hit you in the face. Nowadays, it's you're a dummy, and that's bullying. And so, but I guess I mean, you hear that enough, it hurts probably even worse.
From physical bullying to psychological bullying.
Yeah, yeah. Physical bullying is easier to deal with. All you got to do is hit back.
Easier to see. It's also easier to see the effects.
Yeah. Well, and
You have
yeah,
knowing the effects.
right. Because they're usually pretty immediate.
Never stop their bullies.
So a gossip goes about telling secrets, but one who keeps trustworthy in spirit keeps a confidence. That one doesn't even need to be explained, does it? Now, there's one here that I really like. When there is no guidance, a nation falls, but in abundance of counselors, there is safety. What do you think that says?
Get advice from wise people.
Yeah, don't try to lead alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's what some of our greatest leaders have done, is they've had the right people around them, you know, to tell them. And it's not just a bunch of yes people saying, well, this is how things ought to be. And, you know, you should agree with me all the time. You get people that'll tell you, no, that's kind of a dumb idea, Mr. President. Maybe we ought to think something else. Or, you know, let's look at this another way. That's how nations prosper. It's not by the brain of one person. It's by the counsel of many. Because we all have different ways of looking at things, and nobody's right 100% of the time. Heck, we're doing good to about 50 or 500. Lastly, to guarantee loans for a stranger brings trouble, but there is safety in refusing to do so. I can't imagine a situation where this would be applicable in our time, unless you were a banker. But if you're a banker, then they're not a stranger, because you can dig into them. But and I guess guaranteeing a loan is what? Co-signing for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess back in those days, people used to just go around and say, hey, will you co-sign this loan for me? We've never met or anything.
Stephen, you still see that today in dating situations where, like, for instance, they meet somebody on something, and the person that they're dating convinces them that they need to co-sign for them. And yes, they think they know the person, but they don't really.
Yep.
And so you still get some of that guaranteeing a loan for somebody you think you know, but you don't really. So I think that's where that might
Yeah,
go.
and that makes sense, because and then you see it on the people scored all the time. Maybe it's, if you think you know somebody, they're not a complete stranger, but you better know them better than you think you do.
Yeah. Well, and think about the scam where a grandchild supposedly calls a grandmother, like happened with Annette Benson, my grandchildren in Greensboro's other grandmother, when supposedly Jacob called and said he needed money. He had been in an accident. And
she didn't recognize his voice.
He had been, what was it? He had been, because he'd been in the accident, his mouth was, he'd lost a tooth or something, so that his voice didn't sound right. But she called him the wrong name. So she knew it wasn't Jacob, but she wouldn't have done it anyway. So she said, Jacob, I'm going to call your parents and let them talk to you. And they hung up on her. But that's the same. And a lady in our church got taken by that. In other words, she guaranteed a loan thinking it was for her grandchild, and it was somebody she didn't know.
Well, and other people, like the big scam, and they do this with church people a lot. I've gotten emails from the bishop. Actually, Rachel got an email from the bishop one time when she was on Synod Council asking her to go buy gift cards to give to people. And she was in high school. And so I'm thinking, why would the bishop call the one person that is least likely to have $100 to go get a gift card and ask him to do this? So I called the Synod office, and sure enough, the bishop was in the Synod office and not stuck in Virginia or wherever it said that he was. And so, but my staff has gotten emails from me asking for that. And Miss Carmen, our former director at the preschool, the assistant director, was about to go out and buy these things for me because it was like for staff appreciation or something. But then she ran to me in the hall and asked me about it. I'm like, no, that's, and if you look at the email addresses closely, it's not the real email address. It just starts out the same.
I got a text last week from Damian Williams asking me if I had time to go by and pick up some Google Play cards for him because he was in a meeting. I said, well, that don't sound like Damian to me. So,
No. Damien
so I
doesn't ask
called
other
him
people.
and I said, are you in a meeting? I don't know how they got my name, but and you to sign his name, but it was there.
Yeah, that's weird. That I mean, that's just how people connect other people is really strange.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. All right, we're going to go 6 to 22 now. A gracious woman gets honor, but she who hates virtue is covered with shame. The timid become destitute, but the aggressive gain riches. Those who are kind reward themselves, but the cruel do themselves harm. The wicked earn no real gain, but those who sow righteousness get a true reward. Whoever is steadfast in righteousness will live, but whoever pursues evil will die. Crooked minds are an abomination to the Lord, but those of blameless ways are his delight. Be assured the wicked will not go unpunished, but those who are righteous will escape. Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without good sense. All right, look through those and we'll talk about them.
Well, that slows it down pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what do you hear in these? it is interesting that verse 16 is a double parable. Now, let's look at this one. The timid become destitute, but the aggressive gain riches. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, I had a question mark beside that.
Well, why do you think it says that?
Well, I think the aggressive do gain riches because they don't mind pushing others aside. But that doesn't sound like a very positive thing to me.
But
Well,
it's very true in business.
but aggression isn't necessarily a bad thing, is it?
No. You've got to have some aggression if you're in business.
Well, if you're in any kind of competitive field, I mean, if you're playing sports and you're not aggressive, you're going to lose.
Mhm.
And if you're timid,
You might get hurt.
well, you could, or you're going to get run over and you ain't going to win. I mean, Dietta's youngest and my youngest both play lacrosse, and they play the same position. They both play defense. And I promise you, the coach is never yelling to them, be timid, be timid. Because timidity will get you nowhere. Now aggression, but I mean, I think this is, if you couple it with everything else, you learn what aggression means. Because I mean, you can't discount all the other things about being righteous and being wicked and how you treat others. And so clearly here, aggression means going after it. Stepping up, doing what you can do. Aggression can have a negative connotation, but I don't think that it has one here.
And that's the way I read it, was as a negative connotation. But after listening to Margaret and you, I see that it's a positive connotation.
Yeah, well, and again, when you follow in Proverbs, when you follow the pattern, it's easier to understand, right? Because it's usually positive, negative, or negative, positive. And clearly the other one is negative. Those who are kind reward themselves, but the cruel do themselves harm. Isn't that interesting? Because you would think that the kind give other rewards and the cruel harm others. But here it says that they harm themselves and they reward themselves. Now, in 18, there is a shift. The wicked earn no real gain, but to those who sow righteousness get a true reward. Because before that, it was positive, negative. Here, it's negative, positive. And then it goes back to positive, negative. Whoever is steadfast in righteousness will live, but whoever pursues evil will die. Crooked mind, and then it switches again. Crooked minds are an abomination to the Lord, but of the blameless ways are his delight. Be assured that the wicked will not go unpunished, but those who are righteous will escape. And then the closing one, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without good sense. Now that is the first time that we've had a parable that doesn't go both ways. It's just a metaphor, or actually a simile, because it has the word like in it. Yes, I listened in school. But it's interesting. The commentary said in its colorful language and what was it? Masculine driven, because it talks about a beautiful woman and I guess in our modern ears that could be like, well, why can't it be a pretty man? Well, because again, we have to remember who this was directed to. It wasn't directed to women, it was directed to men. And so basically a gold ring, which is beautiful, and a pig snout, which is horrible, is like a beautiful woman who's dumb. And a gold ring would be of great worth, but it's really, the worth is kind of diminished if it's in a pig snout. Just say it. And what good is a pretty woman if she can't walk and chew gum at the same time?
In my Bible, there's a comment that says inner character counts more than outer beauty.
Yes. Wisdom. All right. Let's move forward. (23 to 27). The desire of the righteous ends only in good, the expectation of the wicked in wrath. Some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due and only suffer want. A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water. The people curse those who hold back grain, but a blessing is on the head of those who sell it. Whoever diligently seeks good seeks favor, but evil comes to the one who searches for it. All right, look through those, and we will return to them. There's kind of a theme here, isn't there? One that our treasurer should definitely appreciate.
Yeah, number 24, as you say, give till it feels good. So you're not giving because you need to give, you're giving because it makes you feel good and helps you.
Yeah. Others withhold what is due, and all they want is want more. You rarely see an unhappy, generous person. In fact, studies have shown that the happiest people are generous. And so these are the desire of righteous only ends in good, and the expectation of the wicked in wrath. Now that's interesting. I didn't understand it when I first read it. So the desire of the righteous, what they want, ends in good. But the expectation of the wicked ends in wrath, what they expect. There's a difference between what you want and what you expect, isn't there? And in today's, we'll go with the millennials. We'll pick on them a minute because they're not here. There is a theme among some people that they that they deserve, that there's just this deserving of everybody, gets a trophy generation, which employers are struggling with very, very much. And it's interesting to see, because you hear from seminaries and things like that, how things that we just dealt with. I mean, now some of it's good that somebody's actually speaking up, but at the same time, there's an expectation of everything being handed over, of getting everything that you want. And when the real world hits, it's nothing but disappointment. It's interesting to see on Facebook, and maybe it's always been this way. Y'all can attest to this. But it drives Stacy nuts when she sees teachers on vacation in the middle of the school year. Like they just took a week off and went to the beach, which, by the way, they can do. You've got all these days, you're allowed to take them, but Stacy would never do that. Like, I think she's taken maybe 3 personal days in 25 years. And she's like, well, I'll get them all back. I said, no, you'll get some of them back. You've ranked up so many that you won't get them all back. I mean, her last year of teaching, she ought to just take off every other week. And then use the Terry plan and get paid for all those days back. But I mean, it is very different. There's this expectation. And when you expect what you expect, that's not always good. So let's see, now in 25, it's all positive. The generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water. So it's something that they don't have to worry about. That when you give, you get. And that's true. I mean, I have learned that along the way. Of course, to be fair, it's easier to give when you've got. That's true too.
But Stephen, you can look at it in a less monetary way. They say that if you smile at people, they smile back. And so that's being generous. You're giving a smile to help uplift somebody else, and they smile back at you to make you feel good. So there are different ways to be generous.
That is true. That is very true. That's a good point. That'll preach. It might show up in a sermon or word for Wednesday or something, in fact.
Oh, I'll be impressed.
I'm thinking, I don't know if you folks saw it on Facebook, but I put out there asking for suggestions, and I've gotten like 92 responses, and some of them are multiple responses. Now, some of them are duplicates, and some of them I've already done before, but that's so very helpful, because the hardest thing is always figuring out what word I'm going to use. And so I've got a really good list of words that I can go through, and I'm thinking maybe I'll tag people in them and to remember their suggestion, let them, it'll show up on their feed. So, all right, let's finish this off then. (28 through 31). Those who trust in their riches will wither, but the righteous will flourish like green leaves. Those who trouble their households will inherit wind, and the fool will be the servant to the wise. the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, but violence takes lives away. If the righteous are repaid on earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner? Read through those, and then we'll chat about them. All righty. So what do you learn in those parables? Anything? I kind of like the last one. If the righteous are repaid on earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner? I've always said that the punishment for our sins are the results of our actions. We reap what we sow. And I think that holds true. You know, how much more? Those who trouble their households will inherit wind. You take your mom and daddy out, they're gonna cut you out of the will. Those who trust in their riches will wither. Again, it is interesting how, like I said, Proverbs does interesting things with money, right? It talks about that being wise, you will get money, but then it also reminds you, don't trust in that money. This ain't why you do it. Because money's not everything. And so the wisdom here is, I mean, again, it's a very deep level of it. Things in Proverbs are not black and white. Although they're written in black and white, basically, right? Because I mean, it's this way or this way, you know, right path, wrong path. But then, you know, when you start talking about wealth, for instance, being wise brings you wealth, but that wealth, that ain't what it's all about. And so, you know, it's like an ogre. There's different layers. Or an onion if you haven't seen Shrek. So, all right. Well, that's all for this week. We will be meeting tonight at Crafty Draft. Your weekly announcements are out. If you have not taken the Congregational Vitality Survey, please do so. Get those in as soon as possible, because this is the last week. I've said that before, but this is for real this time. And part of it is we have no idea how many people have taken them, because most of our people do it online. And so I keep saying, You know, maybe it's this fear that I don't think anybody's taking it, and maybe that fear is unfounded. But yeah, so like Deanna, all of your kids can take it.
Oh,
It's anybody 12 and up.
okay.
So so y'all should be all right. Okay, everybody, I will see you one way or another soon.